So, I think that we can all agree that Netflix originals are a bit of a mixed bag. From Orange is the New Black, to 13 Reasons Why, to Cobra Kai. It's very clear that Netflix has a considerable sized library of original content with a vast range of quality, and one of the examples of Netflix's higher quality programs would be Stranger Things. Of course, this series doesn't need an introduction due to its tremendous popularity. It can't be that popular though, since Netflix can't stop losing subscribers. Rip Bozo. However, with such a popular show comes with a stupendous spectrum of opinions. You may think Season 1 is the second coming of Jesus. You could also have the opinion that Season 2 was the second spawn of Satan. You might believe Season 3 was just fucking mid. But Season 4, however, I've learned that it has quite a split consensus. For every 4 videos praising, celebrating, and sucking the toes of the newest season, you'll find a 5th video absolutely dogging on it. But I want to be the 6th video, praising what I liked about the season and placing what I found to be flawed under scrutiny. Join me as I attempt to justify why I believe Stranger Things 4 has improved upon its predecessors, while also introducing its own unique set of flaws. Let's begin. To preface this critique, review, video essay, whatever you'd like to call it, I'd like to clarify that I don't dislike Stranger Things Season 4. This video's title isn't why Stranger Things Season 4 sucks. However, I will be dedicating the opening portions of this video to what I believe are the flaws of this 4th installment, with the first being the writer's choice to bring back Jim Hopper. As we all reluctantly remember, Hopper supposedly died in the finale of Season 3, and personally, I felt as if this was a proper send-off for his character. Throughout the previous trilogy of Stranger Things content, the viewer observes how Jim Hopper molded himself into the loving father figure which we all know and love him for being, which is in stark contrast to the cold, no-nonsense police chief he was introduced as, and seeing this evolution in Hopper's character is what made his death a lot more valuable to the story being told, and any competent story requires both stakes and consequences. Let's take a look at Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. The end goal of the film was to shut off Doc Ock's fusion reactor, as well as saving Mary Jane. But if Spider-Man's plan doesn't succeed, the fusion reactor will destroy the city, and MJ will die. Those are the stakes. If you've seen the movie, spoiler warning. Why am I giving a spoiler warning for a movie that's almost 20 years old? Just go fucking watch it. Anyway, if you've seen the movie, you'd know that Spider-Man wins, but the cost of winning was Doc Ock sacrificing himself, and Spider-Man losing his anonymity with Mary Jane. Those are the consequences. So let's get back to the topic of Stranger Things, more specifically, Season 3's finale. Our characters are currently stuck inside Starcourt Mall, with the Mind Flayer's fleshy form right on their tails. And Jonathan Byers does the 1000 degree knife challenge 32 years before it was popularized.
We interrupt this broadcast due to the death of Queen Elizabeth II.
Since the gate that the Russians opened is situated underneath Starcourt Mall, the cast brainstorm a plan to close the aforementioned gate. If said plan fails, then Hawkins and potentially the rest of the world is at stake, due to the Mind Flayer still being around, as well as the Russians potentially having leverage in a war scenario. As we know, the gate was sealed and the Mind Flayer was defeated, but at the cost of both Billy and Hopper's lives, demonstrating to the audience that the actions of these characters have dire consequences. What made Hopper's death so beautiful is the change in his character that I mentioned earlier, similar to Tony Stark's death in Avengers Endgame, as well as the closing minutes of the episode being dedicated to Hopper's absence, with Eleven's reading of Hopper's message to her and Mike feeling like a proper emotional send-off. Now that I've explained why Hopper's death was meaningful and helped the story, allow me to explain why I believe keeping him alive is completely moronic. Two things I mentioned a lot were stakes and consequences, and Hopper still being alive takes away these two valuable structural points. It was blatantly obvious that killing off Hopper was done to raise stakes and supply consequences, but with the stunt pulled by the writers this season, we'll always be second guessing whether a character is actually dead or not. so choosing to keep Hopper alive lowers the stakes and removes consequences from the equation, which in turn ruins Season 3's ending. Apart from lowering the stakes and removing consequences, I have two more reasons as to why I don't believe Hopper should have been kept alive. A. Hopper's method of survival doesn't make much sense. The guy should have evaporated or at least be blown away by the explosion as he was running away. I wonder if he's light speed and can see bullets in slow motion. B. The Hopper recovery mission doesn't really add much to the story, apart from giving Joyce and Murray something to do. He didn't really need them though, he should have just fought his way out of the gulag and dropped back into Hawkins. Hopper W. But with or without Hopper being brought back like Christ on Easter Sunday, the season would remain majorly unchanged. Joyce would be taking care of her kids, for once, and Murray would still be doing karate on Fridays. On the topic of doing karate on Fridays, let's talk about a character who won't be able to attend, that being Eddie Munson. Once the first 7 episodes of Season 4 were released, Eddie was the character who caught people's interests, for reasons which ranged between how attractive Joseph Quinn is, and how attractive Eddie Munson is. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone who disliked Eddie. What did it for me, however, was his charisma, his love of the good kush, and his passion for Dungeons and Dragons. But there is another aspect I liked, which indirectly spawned from Eddie's existence, that being the Satanic Panic C-plot, but we'll get to that later. A consistent theme of Eddie's character was his constant running away. He encouraged Dustin to run away in D&D. He ran away when Chrissy was getting that good snap, snap, suck. And he ran away from Jason and the Basketball Mafia when they went to Reefer Rick's house. At no point during any of these confrontations does he convey an issue with running away from these active threats. If anything, it makes more sense for him to run, rather than him not to run. But for some reason, during Season 4's finale, he has the mind-blowing epiphany of running away bad, which causes him to go Munson mode. And he cuts the rope, then cycles off into the Upside Down as he's being chased by an army of Demobats. This hero moment comes completely out of left field, and as I previously stated, Eddie had no issue running away until now. If anything, this moment could be interpreted as Eddie continuing to run away, because he knows that if he went back to the normal world, he can only hide for so long, and would have to face some kind of consequences for something he didn't do. But Max knows a good lawyer, so who knows, he could have gotten off scot-free in a potential Munson vs. Hawkins B-plot, which will actually be a crossover with Better Call Saul. Jokes aside, if this moment was to be built up, a way in which the writers could have done it is to have Eddie express his discontent with running from everything. Have Eddie mention it a couple of times during conversation with characters like Dustin and Steve. With Eddie's discontent being established, this hero moment would feel more logical and less impulsive. While we are on the topic of death, it is very apparent that the Duffer Brothers aren't very keen on killing off members of the main cast. I demonstrated that earlier with their not so great decision to bring back Jim Hopper, but there was another fake out death this season, that being Max. After the events of episode 9, Max is currently blind and in a coma as a result of her second encounter with Vecna. If I were in the writer's room, I would have thrown out the coma idea and opted to have Max meet her end during episode 9. Now I'm not coming to this conclusion because I dislike Max Mayfield or Sadie Sink. Quite frankly, I'd like to have Sadie Sink bear my children, but that is besides the point. I believe Max should have died due to all of the growth she went through this season. Of course, I'll be discussing this growth in a later segment of this video, but allow me to give you a TLDR. Max is a very vulnerable character, but she's also a very guarded one, and during the first part of Season 4, these vulnerabilities are explored in a very compelling way, with these vulnerabilities revolving around her late stepbrother Billy and their relationship. As well as exploring these vulnerabilities, she also breaks down her guard during the running up that hill scene, where instead of accepting death, she chooses to embrace those around her, and once we get to the final battle with Vecna, Max has a moment of empowerment, where she chooses to be bait for Vecna. The reason I use the term empowerment is because Max has found a cause that is worth literally sacrificing her life for, and that is a very admirable trait. So with Max's character going through a lot of growth this season, I don't think I'm alone in my belief that if Max had died during the finale, it would be a satisfying end for her character. Another character who should have died this season is Steve Harrington. time. During season 1 of Stranger Things, Steve was actually meant to die. But the Duffer brothers, by the grace of God, decide to not to kill him off, Duffer W. In every season post the first installment, Steve has taken a mentoring and guardian-like role, because he's a lovely man with a lot of love to give. But ever since season 2, Steve has been trying to fill a Nancy Wheeler-shaped hole in his heart. He believed that he found the one with Robin in season 3, but we all know what happened there.
I'm gay.
So throughout the majority of season 4, he denies his desire for the Nancy Wheeler-Russie until just before the final battle with Vecna. With Steve's admittance of his feelings toward Nancy, a great send-off for him would have been sacrificing himself to save Nancy, which means that Steve's death would replace Eddie's, making season 4's finale a sadder but more satisfying conclusion. As I mentioned earlier, something I liked which spawned from Eddie's character was the satanic panic C-plot, and that is because it portrays a lot of compelling themes surrounding grief, peer pressure, and mob mentality, with the C-plot being based off of the moral panic caused by D&D during the 80s. However, this part is in the flaws segment for a reason, and that is because of how quickly Jason progresses from sadness to anger in response to Chrissy's death. As we know, episode 2 is dedicated to the opening of numerous investigations into Chrissy's death. One by the main cast, another by the Hawkins Police Department, and the third by the Hawkins High School basketball team. But my focus will be on the investigation conducted by the Hawkins High basketball team, and my issue stems from how quickly it begins. Once Jason has finished talking to police, he runs off into the woods and has a breakdown. This is good, as it demonstrates that he's affected by the loss of his girlfriend, entering the first stage of grief, denial. When we see Jason again within episode 2 though, he's already moved on from his stage of denial and went straight to anger. Jason's character progression doesn't feel natural, because character change is done via cause and effect. In this case, we see the effect, but not the cause. Let's take a look at Huey from The Boys, as he goes through a lot of character changes within one episode. Before Robin gets turned into ketchup, Huey is what I'd like to call a soy cuck. But once Robin gets ran through by A-Train and Vought offers him $40k after signing a boilerplate NDA, Huey prepares to go after Vought by any means necessary. There we have our cause and the effect, with Robin's death being the cause and Huey's desire to go against Vought being the effect. Back to Jason though, I think one way for him to reach the logical conclusion of anger is to have him ponder over Chrissy's passing, and during this pondering period, his teammates could encourage his anger toward Eddie, especially when you take into consideration that they all believe Chrissy would never touch the devil's lettuce. One of Jason's teammates could bring up the fact she went to Eddie's, causing Jason to come to the seemingly logical conclusion that Eddie killed Chrissy, and this realization is the catalyst for Jason's anger. Cause and effect. Character Progression 101. With those out of the way, I'd like to stop being such a big hater and actually discuss things that I liked about this season, and a recurring theme of these positive aspects is that they've built off of flaws that were apparent within the previous installments of the show. One of the flaws that season 4 has acted upon is the characterization of Max Mayfield, placing her in more of a leading role, instead of her playing a part in the development of her castmates. During season 2, it seemed as if the writers had no real idea as to what they were doing with Max. One minute she was a disinterested, mean girl loner, and the next minute she's a social butterfly who wants to be a part of the friend group. This range of behaviour isn't the issue though. If anything, it's a positive attribute as this provides depth to her character. It's the lack of transition between these two different modes of her character which makes this a point of contention, because instead of creating a complex character, we are given a confusing one. As well as this confusing complexity, she didn't have much of a plot role in season 2 either. Sure, she makes Elle jealous, her existence irritates Mike, as well as causing Dustin and Lucas to get off their grind set because they've never interacted with a girl before. She does impact the group. However, if you replace her with any other character, you'll more than likely get the same outcome. The writers do improve on the characterization of Max in season 3 by having her take part in the development of Elle's identity, and Max is the perfect character for this, since she's both streetwise and independent. In addition to this, season 3's plot is very relevant to Max, because her stepbrother Billy is acting as the antagonist, and this relevance is clearly demonstrated during the sauna scene, where we see both a compassionate and confused Max feeling guilt over the harming of Billy. Also during the sauna scene, we get to see the transition between Max's behavior types that was unseen in Season 2. Finally, we can discuss Season 4's improvement of Max, and this improvement stems from her being the target of Vecna's curse, as well as the cruelty of fate. Due to all of Vecna's victims having their own trauma and vulnerabilities, Max's response to this is very compelling, as she's expressing vulnerability towards people she cares about while also being very guarded. A complete oxymoron. We get an insight as to what is behind the wall within episode 4, and it's regarding her relationship with Billy. Seeing her sat by his grave reading her seemingly final message to him was a very interesting watch due to Max's guarded nature, and knowing that all she wanted was a normal brother-sister relationship was heartbreaking, along with Max reprimanding herself for having such a seemingly immature and unrealistic desire. Vecna then visits Max in the form of Billy, and causes both Max and the audience to second-guess their own feelings about the sequence we've just discussed. Vecna believes Max was just lying to herself because of her fear that she's a bad person like Billy and her stepfather, which provides the audience with a lot of questions. Is Vecna right about Max? Does this letter show us how Max truly is? Did she want Billy to die? Could Max and Billy have a fresh start? As well as these questions about Max's character, a question of morality pops up. Is it morally wrong to wish death upon someone who abused you? Asking these questions is a very compelling story mechanic, as it creates and encourages the audience to find a new form of investment in the narrative. Speaking of, let's get back to the narrative, shall we? Max is faced with the seemingly impossible task of surviving Vecna's curse, since both the writers and the audience know that Max cannot die. But the Victor Creel side plot of the 4th episode has set up the foundations for Max to survive. It's a decision of accepting her fate or choosing her friends. And once we get past the thematic montage, she makes that decision, breaking down the wall and embracing those very relationships she guards herself from. We finally reached the second half of Season 4, and in this portion of the season, Max offers herself up to Vecna as bait, which I believe is quite empowering, but not in a go off queen, slay, #girlboss kinda way. Instead, it's more about finding purpose. Max has undoubtedly had a bit of a terrible life, abusive stepbrother, asshole stepfather. It sucked for her, so she's found a cause that means enough for her that she's willing to metaphorically or literally sacrifice her life for is very admirable. I'm glad to see the Duffer brothers have improved on their characterization of Max, perfecting her foundation in her 3rd season of Prevalence. I guess the 3rd time is truly the charm. So, I briefly mentioned Vecna in the previous section, and I believe he fixed the Stranger Things villain problem. We've had many different antagonists throughout the series, the Demogorgon and Dr. Brenner being the first, followed by the Mind Flayer, Billy, and the Russians. But what sets Vecna apart from these is that we have something to grab onto and empathize with. Something human. Most of the antagonists I've mentioned prior were either mindless beasts or basic bitches. They lacked something to grab onto. I mean, sure, we had Billy, but he wasn't acting out of his own fruition, so he doesn't really count. And Season 1 Dr. Brenner can be boiled down to lab man bad. But the upside down monsters were quite compelling, despite being unable to empathize with them. What makes these monsters gripping antagonists is the initial mystery which surrounds each of them. In Season 1, we don't know what the Demogorgon is, and why they're hunting people, but in reality we can infer that it was because they were hungry, with this hunger starting a chain reaction, which would lead to the trying times of 2018's KFC chicken shortage, where one woman reportedly had to go to Burger King. During Seasons 2 and 3, we don't know why the Mind Flayer wants to end the world. To this day, we still really don't, at least until Season 4, but we'll get back to that later. Within Season 4, there is an initial mystery about what Vecna is and why they're killing people. However, the more important question surrounds who Vecna is, and the reveal of Vecna's identity is very enfixing in a multitude of different ways. The first reason as to why Vecna's reveal is compelling is due to the fact it subverts the audience's expectations. The opening sequence of Season 4's first episode features what we believe to be Eleven killing her siblings. Throughout the B-plot, which revolves around 11's reclaiming of her powers, we are presented with a lot of flashbacks, which demonstrate the torment 11 endured from her siblings. So the aforementioned sequence in conjunction with the flashbacks led us into believing 11 had killed them, when in reality they were slain by number 1. My second reason stems from the insight we were given into the character of Dr. Brenner. Throughout Season 1, we learned next to nothing about Dr. Brenner, no insight into his motivations, goals, or anything of the sort. All we really had was an imitating presence that loomed over our characters. But now that Brenner is no longer a villain, we learned a lot more about him as the catalyst of Vecna's identity reveal, as well as on the run-up to the prior mentioned reveal. We understand Brenner's fondness for 11, as well as where that fondness stems from. We're also given an insight as to why Brenner took a keen interest in the Upside Down, since he believed that Henry/Juan/Vecna was still out there. With the pieces of information we are given about Brenner, we can conclude that his methods were very unethical, but he was at least kind of well-intentioned. And my final reason as to why Vecna's reveal is captivating is because it gives the audience an answer as to the Mind Flayer's motivations. I'd previously stated that the question behind the Mind Flayer's motivations had been left unanswered until Season 4, and due to Season 4's existence, we can infer that Vecna is the mastermind behind the events of the previous seasons. We can then conclude that Vecna and the Mind Flayer share a motivation, which is quite bluntly told to us during episode 7 of Season 4. Honestly though, I think Dr. Brenner should have stopped giving Henry the black pill, Jesus. So the addition of Vecna to the roster of Stranger Things antagonists has added depth to both Dr. Brenner and the Mind Flayer, which in a way fixes my previously stated critique of these characters not having anything to grab onto. The addition of Vecna has tied up everything prior into a neat bow, and I wonder if Season 5 will give us any lore for prior seasons, but I'm highly doubtful. To conclude this video essay, review, critique, whatever you want to call it, I'd like to say that I believe Stranger Things 4 was a compelling installment to the Duffer Brothers' creation. The flaws speak for themselves, but so do the improvements and strengths I pointed out throughout this video. If I were to rank all 4 seasons so far, I'd place Season 1 as the best, followed by Season 4, then Season 3, and finally Season 2. Maybe I'll make a video as to why Season 2 isn't that great at some point in the future. Before I go though, I'd like to leave you all with my predictions for the future. Outlets like Radio Times, Pop Buzz, TV Line, and Screen Rant have reported that Season 5 of Stranger Things will feature a time jump, and I'm assuming that will be done to age match the actors to the characters they're playing, which is a good move IMO. But what does that mean for the plot? At the end of Season 4, the Upside Down has begun to infect Hawkins at a very fast rate. If they are aging up the characters to match their actors, making it an at least 3-year time jump, I imagine Hawkins to be uninhabitable by then. There's also Max. She's in a coma after the final battle with Vecna. Hopefully the Duffer Brothers don't go the route of bring her back into the fold off screen with no explanation, but you can never be too sure. The most reasonable options are to keep her in a coma or pull the plug on her life support off screen and have the grieving of Max's passing be a recurring plot point in the season. There is a third option, where Max could wake up randomly during Season 5, but that isn't much better than bringing her back off screen. As for deaths, I think that 11 will, and maybe even Steve will die. 11 because she's the one who first opened the Upside Down and sent Henry there, Will due to the fact he's the connection between the Upside Down and the real world, and Steve because I don't know where else they could take his character next season. If I were writing Season 4, I would have killed off Steve and have Eddie be his replacement. With my predictions out of the way, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I hope you like, subscribe, and maybe even share this video. While you're there, follow my Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd, where you'll receive video updates, my takes on media, and my attempts at being funny. Anyway, I've been Enfixed, and I am a pretentious nobody.